Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today I'm going to be checking out a track from an act named Kaiak titled Doggy Woggy. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the video on the screen here. We're going to be watching the music video today for this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go.
I thought it would be just a phase.
I mean, it's so gorgeous with the vocals and effects on the start.
I could have pleased her some way, waiting for that day to come, but it turned out to be wrong, as I kept burning my sore ears in vain. No one
The tippy taps of the cymbals.
no one denied repay. The doggy woggy won't stop calling in commotion every day. The party killer won't stop balling, never giving us a break.
It's kind of wild how sort of instant that transition was, that vibe shift there, with the vocals on the side coming in with the bass, with the drums and everything like that.
The doggy woggy won't stop bombarding like a non-stop royal pain.
Great shift in the intensity for sure.
Calling.
Interesting chords and harmony as well.
Many parts in the play. You're bully or me, I'm afraid. Kinda hard to battle on in a game already won. See why I feel like I'm chasing my tail.
And there's those interesting sort of unusual synth tones there that kind of not only sound great within the ether of the arrangement with the different chord choices and scales and melodies and stuff, but it's also the fact that there's space for it because of the dynamic range of this track, and that it's just an interesting, unusual tone. I haven't heard much of that synth across the thousands of tracks that I've heard, and I kind of dig that it's unique. It catches your attention, right?
Won't stop calling in commotion every day. The party killer won't stop balling, never giving us a break. The doggy woggy won't stop bombarding like a non-stop royal pain. The doggy woggy won't stop calling.
And saxophone, very classy. I mean, it's just the fact that we knew how to adjust for those modulations there, those voicings to suit the extensions within the chord shapes there. We kept the 16th note groove the entire time with a bit of swing flow to it, which is very difficult to do. We had variations in the loudnesses of the certain notes. The performance itself was very smooth. And overall, it's just a really stellar, different instrument, you know, taking over the lead in a way that's very compelling.
Calling in commotion every day. The party killer won't stop balling, never giving us a break. The doggy woggy won't stop bombarding like a non-stop royal pain. The doggy woggy won't stop calling.
And a reintroduction of the saxophone there as a continuation. And they look like they're having a great time. They're really into it as well, which is nice.
Like a non-stop royal pain. The doggy woggy won't stop calling. Yeah, oh no, 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 no.
little bit of falsetto to finish things off. Okay, so we had recorded in Tone Control Studio engineer Ake Linton, drums Rasmus Kilberg, guitar Mats Jensus, bass of Andersen, keys Marcos Obeda, vocals Emil Gulham, producer Marcus Obeda, and video editing Emil Gulham. Apologies if the pronunciation of those is totally scuffed. I think this track is incredible. It's not just that I can tell there was a lot of effort put into it, the performances were tight as well. The composition itself, the songwriting was really interesting with a lot of variety, while still retaining a sense of consistency throughout in a wide range of areas. But it's also just the fact that it's the charisma of the performance. We're going to look through the lyrics now to kind of sort of get a really kind of clear picture of what things are about, because I kind of felt as if I didn't get all the lyrics clearly because I was paying attention to all the other kind of cool stuff that was going on, and we're going to go to conclusion after that. But you got the lyrics here. I thought it would be just a phase that I could appease her someday, waiting for that day to come, but it turned out to be wrong. The party killer won't stop balling, never giving us a break. The Doggy Woggy won't stop bombarding. The Doggy Woggy won't stop calling. Okay, I kind of get it. So are we like, we're the dog in a situation where we're trying to be a little bit too over-eager, we're trying to overstepping the boundaries a little bit, where we find that we're basically go away shaking our tail, chasing our tail into the day, or with our tail between our legs? And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Kaiak, titled Doggy Woggy, written by Marcos Ubeda and Christian Lagerstrom. Now, what do I think this track is about? I think it's about someone who has thought that, like they'll try to be like a really friendly kind of like Labrador, that if they follow through with what the person wants, that eventually they'll get what they want, but they just continue trying to appease this person. At the end of the day, it just never eventually ended up being enough. So they eventually just kind of had to give up and kind of like let bygones be bygones, and they kind of made the ultimatum near the end, as I understand it, of it's either the bully or me, for example. Like we can't have both. This needs to be a bit more functional than this. So I like the fact that at the start we tried to be as good as we could. Good being subjective, but we tried to make things work, and then eventually we learned that we couldn't, and we kind of looked at the situation from another perspective and kind of got context on it. And I like that sort of development there. It's interesting from a story perspective, if I'm not completely misinterpreting it, but again, it's intriguing. The vocals that support that story are, again, as I mentioned, charismatic. They're upbeat, and they're kind of fluffy, and they're friendly, and they kind of are sung in a way we want to hear them. They're not, how do I describe it? There's 101 ways to do this kind of music where it seems like you're sort of, you're a little bit too over the top with it, but I think the difference in way we approach the chorus with the bigger kind of double tracks on the sides there, keeping the main and lead in the middle, it's more bombastic in the chorus than it is. And even then, bombastic is the wrong word for it. It's because it's very suave the whole way through. I just think we're a little bit more sort of gentle in those verse sections, and then in the chorus parts we kind of pump things up with getting more singers involved there. It elevates with the rest of the instruments in the mix there, because there's a whole lot of space in the composition in the verse sections and other breaks there that we don't necessarily have in the choruses because of all the extra bass and drum parts and those sort of like takes on the sides. Whatever situation we have, I think the story is told clearly with great solid vocal technique. We're comfortable with our melodies and harmonies. I heard in chest voice there and a bit of falsetto near the end, which was really nice. And just ultimately, it's just a really satisfying piece of music to listen through. They clearly understand what they're doing and have the fundamentals covered and more. I think the personality of the performance, the emotionality of it matched. It sounded like someone who was trying to sort of be a little more sort of like down to earth about the situation they're in than what you might necessarily expect. But I think that's a good thing, because if you're too over the top about your desperation for it, it can become a little bit unbecoming, if that makes sense, depending on how you feel about that. But again, I think it was handled well in that respect. The track how long is the song? It's just over 4 minutes, or like around 4 minutes, and it's It's just on the side of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot that we want. I think that with a song that has like verses and choruses and sort of intros and like kind of an outro section, it has sort of several solo sections as well, with like a dedicated saxophone solo section and like an outro with more lead elements on top. I think that there's enough in there, because I think there are verses and bridge choruses as well. So there's a lot going on. There's not just the same chord progression the entire way. Either we switch up with interesting phrasings there. We don't just stay within traditional major minor sort of chord shapes as well. We have extensions, but also I think we have some parallel majors and minors in there. Maybe some chromatics or modular sort of movements there. But alongside a wide range of melodies and a lot of functionality explored within the sets of instruments that were performed within it. But yeah, I don't think there's any filler, and the performance in general is tight. If I talk about a few of the instruments that I really appreciated within it, I think the bass guitar, if I start with that, I think that it was really, it explored the root notes well, was really sort of solid in that low end, but also just really knew how to accentuate some of the triads as well in a way where it kept a sense of funkiness to it without being too sort of over the top. Like, it was thick and bold, but it also knew how to sort of coalesce and amalgamate. I thought the guitars were wonderful too. They were really gentle in some of those verse parts there. We had these steel strings, and they accented notes in the mid to high range that stacked well on top of the bass parts. We weren't just playing the root notes the entire time. We'd explore so maybe sixths or sevenths or something like that, or maybe strum chords in their totality. But it wasn't like always big strums or anything like that. It was like we understood that the 135 had been covered, and we were trying to give more complexity to it. So we did it in a way where it wasn't too overwhelming or off-putting. There was a sparkle to the tones as well, which made them sound nice and fresh, and it simmered along with the rest of the other brighter elements really neatly. There were keys in here as well, which just kind of, again, they sparkled in that high end, mid to high end. They, again, accented the extended harmonies really neatly. They didn't overplay or overwhelm the listener with their energy. It was very smooth sailing for a lot of it. A lot of any pushback came from the drums, but the keys when they were in there, as well as some of the synths there, you know, we did have a bit of oomph from the synths, but it was like enough to kind of not pierce the mix, just kind of rub against it in a way, which was kind of really special. Ultimately, when I listened through what's going on with those synths and how they, especially how they were positioned in the stereo field as well as like a kind of an accompaniment even to further to the side than some of the guitar or key parts there, we clearly understood that it wasn't just the frequency spectrum that we needed to take care of, it was also the width of the piece itself. We had some guitar takes that were more sort of severe on that left side as well there. It sounded like the music was really surrounding us, it was really kind of nice and wide, and I dig that. I also appreciate the drums, not just the tone of the drums. I think the recorded drums sounded fantastic. I love that snares tone, but it's also the way that we had some 8th or 16th note grooves on like the hi-hats, like little sort of like pianissimo parts there, but the kicks and snares, they came in, and even though the drummer pocketed, it just allowed the rest of the piece, the arrangement, the backing, to just kind of let things kind of melt forward and at a solid pace that was catchy and easy to listen to. Again, it was very welcoming. It was like a soothing tone there. We could clearly play the kit, but we knew not to overdo it. If we had any sort of transitions that were relatively, that they were not trying to capture the listener's attention too much or take away from the focal points being the vocals or like the saxophone when it came on or something like that. It was a device to add a further sense of rhythm and groove to it, but it was still really important when it came in those choruses. I kind of dig the fact that there was less intensity there on some of the verse or sort of bridge parts as opposed to the chorus, because it gave the chorus more sort of pep to it. The saxophone was neat. I really did the saxophone tone. I thought that they absolutely smashed the solo of it as well. I talked about how I really appreciated the phrasing of it. It was nice to have again those 16th note swing parts going without there being too many sort of accents on them. We didn't push too hard on any of the specific notes to accent maybe the wrong type of note within the triad or whatever. Again, legato phrasing was neat, and it still sounded like they were really playing a saxophone. Like, it sounded like there was dynamic range to it. So if there was like a moment where it was a little bit more sort of like pointed, it was there for effect. And I think that offered a similar kind of aesthetic to what the vocals might have been doing with, again, the side parts as well, coming in to add a bit sort of more volume there. It's really just ebbs and throws, and I think that, again, the saxophone in that similar sort of frequency range to the vocals was a nice foil for it. And it was a different instrument than we had before, so it was surprising and it was interesting by virtue of that alone when it came in, and it continued to hold that. If I think about like how all these instruments sounded together and like the total kind of make of them in regards to like an overall theme to it, the way music sounded, the concept I think was meant to sort of sound kind of trendy and not too not, how do I say it, not too emotional. Again, there was a suaveness, a sophistication to it, where I think we wanted to talk about something that was probably a little bit heavy in a way where it wasn't going to be like too sort of intense for the listener by virtue of like this, again, the sweetness of some of those brighter elements in there, the lack of pointed triads there with them smoothing out the extensions there within the keys and guitar parts, etc. The consistency without any sort of massive switches in like loudness with like the drums and stuff like that. It all came together in a piece where I think they were just trying to allow the listener to kind of glide through it in a pace where they could just sit there and kind of nod their head and kind of take it really gently. And I appreciate that. You know, you don't always get that with music. A lot of the time it tries to kind of fight for your attention. So to have a piece that trusts you to just be able to listen through it, you know, and not have to constantly pull at you is really neat. And I think that because it sounds really nice, I haven't used that word before in a long time. It just sounds really nice, you know. The qualities of the different chords and within it, the way, you know, the dynamics of it, etc. The seamless transitions there without trying to again be too sort of attention grabby. It just makes the whole experience really kind of worthwhile. And on top of that, the performance across the instruments is just really stellar. Everyone involved did a great job on their chosen instrument. A lot of respect for that, you know. But then we just got the studio recording, mixing and mastering where I think that we absolutely smashed it. It was commercial grade. The vocals, again, the bass, the drums, the guitar, the keys, the synths, you know, the saxophone, everything sounded well recorded and like it was done like in a studio session, but without any extra help needed to kind of sort of sterilize or whatever. They were just great performances from musicians who really knew what they were doing. Things were nicely stacked within the frequency spectrum, so there were no weird resonant frequencies. Things were nice and wide in the stereo field as well, so the music surrounded you in the headphones, which was really good. Especially in some parts where it's even more intense going back here than what I'm used to, but I kind of dig that we explored that occasionally. Again, it was just a nice way to retain attention by moving things around. You know, there was dynamic range, things were not the same loudness all the time. Even if there was like a nice amount of glowing in the overall master, the relative, like if you compare the verse to the chorus, you can tell there's a bit of difference in like how you feel each. But it was still nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression limiting was handled. And effectively, this is my review of this track from an act named Kaiak, titled Doggy Woggy, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go check them out via their various social medias and a Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.